Talk about violence in sport, it's important that we realise that we're not talking here about aggression. Aggression is something different. Aggression is often a sort of a positive part of sport, bowling aggressively in cricket, or making a big hit in rugby, or tackling strongly in hockey, or even attacking a routine in gymnastics. That's a different thing. Here we're talking about a real negative form of violence, something which is absolutely against the rules, is deviant behaviour, and its intent is to harm. So what are the reasons that violence might occur within a sporting context? And they're quite simple, really, but let's go through them one at a time. First of all, people might get frustrated. Now, there's a whole theory called the frustration aggression hypothesis, which I'm not going to get into here. It's more to do with the A-level. But it basically says that frustration leads to arousal, and arousal leads to aggression. So if we get frustrated about all kinds of things, often because we're losing, that might be a reason that violence kind of emerges from us. Second one would be physical retaliation. Somebody strikes at you first, or hits you particularly hard in a tackle, say, and then there's a physical retaliation from that. We see this all the time in team sports, weekend team sports, whether it's us playing or through the media, we see that all the time. So a retaliation might be a common reason, so it might become violent. Now, I mentioned the word arousal earlier. Arousal is like activation, so over arousal can lead to violent behaviour. That, of course, is linked to frustration as well. Furthermore, we could be talking about annoyance with a referee or umpire. So we might become annoyed with a referee. Now, I don't know why. You might know why. This one makes me tend to think about men's football in particular, with a referee's decision. That sort of notion of really getting angry because something goes against you. I think we all see it when we step back. It's kind of very contextual, isn't it? And that people do this, and it seems a bit odd sometimes. Why would you get so worked up about getting a free kick or not getting a free kick? I mean, you see it a lot with sort of elite football and elite men's football. It happens a lot of the time. So that's a good precursor. The other one, and this is in my mind one of the worst ones, is people do it deliberately to gain an advantage. Hurt a particularly strong opponent, to dominate, to intimidate. Those would be sort of really strategic reasons to use violence in a sporting context, and really quite concerning. We might also be talking about something like crowd taunting. Think about a player that's maybe, or a competitor who's playing in an away stadium, for example. They get taunted by a crowd and they react violently against the player because they kind of, again, become over-aroused and become frustrated. That might be one. We might also get this, I've touched on this already really, we might also get this notion of controlled aggression. Now, I want to be clear, this is something that your exam board would like me to tell you. I do not consider controlled aggression to be violence by any stretch of the imagination, but controlled aggression can be effective, and a controlled aggression is in the rules. So I'm putting it there because potentially it's going to be in a mark scheme for you, but I do not agree that that is a form of violence in essence. Okay, so just be aware of maybe that distinction. If you've done the lessons with me on drugs, you'll know that something like roid rage is an issue with drug taking. It might be a stimulant or an anabolic steroid, which creates a more sort of violent, aggressive tendency in someone. This one's a really nuanced or detailed one. We sometimes have what are called aggressive cues. Think about a tennis player who gets, let's say, really frustrated. What do they tend to smash? What do they tend to hit out at? They tend to hit out at the racket, right? So because the racket is there, it's an aggressive cue. Not literally like a snooker cue or anything, but a cue, something that is there. They can become violent in that situation because they've got that in their hand. Other things that are considered to be aggressive cues are the sporting environment itself. Being on a rugby pitch could be an aggressive cue. Someone that was never aggressive and violent outside of that environment might become violent there, right? It's kind of an interesting one. Last couple just to cover. I think I've exhausted my colour list. If I've got anything left, let's go for rivalry. Okay, rivalry, playing a particularly big local rival or a big competition. Hype, something might have got hyped up. This was meant to be like a slash, like a rivalry or hype. And then finally, let's see if I can get this nice yellow in here. What about something also like the nature of the sport? There are some sports which are just violent. I mean, you might be thinking of things like boxing, MMA, but also sports that have a lot of physical contact, and rugby springs to mind immediately, ice hockey springs to mind immediately. They might have a greater propensity to violence than something like maybe basketball, which theoretically is a non-contact sport. I mean, there is contact, and sometimes there is violence. There have been some horrendous violence in basketball matches, but these are some of the reasons why sporting environments might become violent. Thanks.